My name is Claire Wallace. For the first 18 years of my life, I was Arthur and Helen Wallace's daughter, a resident of a pristine Tudor-style house in the Laurelhurst neighborhood of Portland, where the lawns were perpetually green and reputations were meticulously manicured. But for the last decade, my identity has been woven from threads of my own making. I am the mother of Sophie and Leo. I am the founder of Cedar Peak Properties. And I am the woman who lives in a house of glass and cedar, perched on a cliff overlooking the moody, magnificent gray of the Oregon coast. The air here tastes of salt and pine, a constant reminder of the world's vastness and my own small, hard-won place within it. Most mornings, I wake before the sun has a chance to burn through the coastal fog, and I sit on the deck with a cup of coffee, watching the waves churn below. The rhythm of the ocean is the rhythm of my life now, a steady, powerful, and sometimes turbulent advance, followed by a quiet, sighing retreat. It is a piece I built with my own two hands, piece by painful piece. My children are the heart of this house. Sophie, at 9, has my thoughtful eyes and a spirit far wiser than her years. Leo, at 6, is pure kinetic energy, a whirlwind of laughter and untied shoelaces. They are my compass, my true north. Their laughter is the only applause I have ever needed, their small hands in mine the only anchor. This life, this quiet sanctuary of sea mist and warm blankets, is a world away from the one I was born into. And for that, I am endlessly grateful. It began, as so many life-altering stories do, with a foolish, youthful heart. I was 18, full of the kind of reckless optimism that only privilege can breed, when I fell in love with Julian. He had a poet's soul and a restless gaze, and I mistook his intensity for depth. When I found out I was pregnant with Sophie, he swore he would stand by me. We married in a hurried, joyless ceremony at the courthouse, a union my parents attended with faces like stone. They saw it not as a beginning, but as a public relations disaster, a blemish on the perfect family portrait they had so carefully curated. I tried. I truly did. I tried to build a home in the tiny, drafty apartment Julian could afford. I tried to believe his promises, even as they grew thinner and more transparent. But when Leo was born, the weight of two small children, of a life he hadn't bargained for, became too much. He left a note on the kitchen table. I can't do this anymore. A week later, divorce papers arrived. Just like that, I was a 20-year-old single mother of two, cast adrift in a world I was utterly unprepared for. My family's response was a chilling, silent erasure. My calls went to voicemail, my texts unanswered. I was quietly removed from the family group chat, my name a ghost no one dared to speak. My sister, Beatrice, who was always my father's favorite, the one who followed the prescribed path of a prestigious university and a sensible engagement, once told me in a rare, cold phone call that my life was a source of profound embarrassment. For my parents, appearance was reality. My messy, complicated existence, the young marriage, the swift divorce, the two babies, was a stain they couldn't wash out, so they simply cut out that part of the fabric. There was no one to catch me. So I learned to fly, or rather, to fall and get back up, again and again. Loneliness and fear were the relentless winds at my back. I needed to survive, not for myself, but for the two small souls who depended on me for everything. I pounded the pavement of Portland, pushing a double stroller, looking for any work that would accommodate a mother with two toddlers. I was finally hired by a small, unassuming real estate firm, Gresham Realty, to answer phones and make photocopies. The office was my lifeline. During the day, I learned the language of escrows and listings. At night, after putting Sophie and Leo to bed in our cramped, one-bedroom apartment, I studied for my real estate license, fueled by cheap coffee and sheer desperation. On weekends, I offered to clean vacant properties and conduct on-site inspections, my children often napping in the car while I worked. Within 2 years, I had become the top sales agent at the firm. I took my first significant commission check and, instead of buying a nicer car or moving to a better apartment, I bought a dilapidated, 40-year-old bungalow in the Lentz neighborhood. It was a wreck with peeling paint and a yard of weeds, but I saw the bones of it. I saw potential. I spent every spare hour there, Sophie and Leo playing with building blocks on a tarp in the living room while I painted walls, patched plaster, and learned how to fix a leaky toilet from YouTube videos. I rented it out. The rental income became the down payment for my next property, a small duplex. I repeated the cycle: buy, sweat, renovate, rent, refinance. It was a brutal, exhausting rhythm of grit and reinvestment. After I founded Cedar Peak Properties, local investors, drawn to my work ethic and transparent dealings, began to trust me. I built a comprehensive service: acquisition, renovation strategy, and long-term property management. I focused on creating safe, beautiful, and affordable housing, the kind I had desperately needed myself. By my 5th year, I owned 4 buildings. By my 8th, I had a portfolio of 16 properties across Portland and the Willamette Valley. The trust of my tenants became my most valuable asset, leading to more referrals, more deals. I pulled equity, reinvested, and kept building. In a black leather portfolio tucked away in my home office, an asset report details the fruits of that decade of labor. Rows of graphs and figures chart a steady upward climb. The current market valuation of my holdings is approximately $40 million. My children's education, my retirement, and a robust contingency fund for any unforeseen storm are all secured on paper. My family knew none of this. I never told them. What was there to say? If I had presented them with my success, my father, Arthur, might have grunted, "Well, I suppose I misjudged you." But that would have been just another form of conditional love, an approval granted only because I had met some invisible, arbitrary standard of success. What I had always craved from them wasn't approval, but acceptance. I wanted them to see me the scared, determined young mother, and not find me wanting. That had never happened. Not once. So, I chose to prove my worth not with words, but with the quiet, solid reality of the life I was building. And here, in this house filled with the sound of the ocean and the warmth of my children's laughter, I could finally hold my head high. This was enough. The day began like any other Thanksgiving morning, with a sky the color of a pearl and a chill in the air that promised rain. For weeks, Sophie and Leo had been talking about seeing their grandparents. "Will Grandma Helen like the drawings we made?" Leo had asked, his brow furrowed with concentration as he colored a turkey with a purple crayon. "Will Grandpa Arthur let me show him my new dinosaur?" A part of me, a foolish, stubborn part that refused to die, wanted to believe it could be different this year. So, I baked a Marionberry crumble pie, its scent filling my kitchen with the sweet, tart smell of an Oregon summer. It was an offering, a fragile bridge I was attempting to build back to a shore I wasn't even sure existed anymore. I dressed the kids in their warm coats, my hands lingering on their small shoulders. "Remember, we're just going to drop off the pie and say a quick hello," I said, trying to manage their expectations and my own. We drove from the coast back into the city, the familiar landscape of Portland unfolding around us. The Tudor homes of Laurel Hill stood as imposing and perfect as ever. As I pulled up to the curb a block away from my parents' house, I never dared to park directly in front. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Holding the warm pie in my hands, with Sophie and Leo clutching my coat on either side, I walked up the stone path. Before I could even ring the bell, the door opened. My mother, Helen, stood there, her expression carefully neutral, a mask of strained civility. "Claire," she said, her voice thin. "We weren't expecting you." "I know. We won't stay long," I said, forcing a smile. "We just came to drop this off. Happy Thanksgiving." Then my sister, Beatrice, stepped out from the hallway, her arms crossed over a cashmere sweater. Her face, a sharper, more judgmental version of my mother's, was pinched with irritation. "Seriously, Claire? You had the nerve to show up on Thanksgiving? What if the neighbors saw you? This is so embarrassing." I took a deep breath, the scent of the pie suddenly cloying. "I just came to say hi." Sophie and Leo were looking forward to seeing their grandparents. "Lying to your children now, are you?" My father's voice, a low growl from the living room, cut through the air. He appeared in the doorway, his face ruddy, his posture rigid with disapproval. Arthur Wallace had always been a man who took up all the oxygen in a room. Just like their mother. These two won't grow up to be anything worthwhile. How could they, with a parent like you? The words were a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. But before I could even process the sting, Sophie's small voice trembled beside me. Mom works hard every day, she said, her chin jutting out. She wakes up early and makes us lunch. Every single day. I quickly wrapped my arm around her shoulders, feeling the tremor that ran through her small body. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back, her gaze fixed on her grandfather's thunderous face. Mom is my hero. My father's face froze, a flicker of shock crossing his features before it twisted into pure fury. Shut your mouth. A child with no manners. Utterly insolent. He pointed a trembling finger toward the door. Get out. Get out of my house, and don't you ever set foot here again. My mother and sister chimed in, a Greek chorus of dismissal. He's right, Claire. You should just leave. Don't bring your drama to this house again. I adjusted the children's coats and clutched the pie, its warmth a stark contrast to the ice in the room. This time, I didn't respond. I didn't argue, I didn't plead, I didn't cry. There was no anger, only a profound and sudden emptiness, a quiet clarity. I had spent a decade trying to earn my place back in a house where I had never truly belonged. Now I saw it for what it was, a beautifully decorated cage of judgment. There was no one left to prove myself to. No one worth convincing. Only the warmth of Sophie's and Leo's tiny hands guided me forward. They were my quiet pride, my unwavering strength. All right, I said, my voice even. It was the only thing I said. I turned and walked away. I held my children's hands and didn't look back, not even when I heard the heavy oak door slam shut behind us. I felt Sophie's trembling back under my hand and squeezed Leo's hand as he fought back tears. We got back in the car and buckled our seatbelts in silence. I started the engine and drove slowly through the quiet, tree-lined streets. The scent of Marionberry pie still lingered faintly in the air, a sweet, sad ghost. From the back seat, the kids were quiet, wrapped in their blankets, staring out at the passing houses. Mom, Leo asked softly, his voice small. Why was Grandpa so mad? At 6, he saw the world in simple terms. He could feel the cold, but he couldn't comprehend the years of layered resentment behind it. Sometimes, honey, when people are very sad or disappointed about things, it comes out as anger, I said, my eyes meeting his in the rearview mirror. That's the only way they know how to show it. But you didn't do anything wrong, Sophie whispered. At 9, she understood every word, every subtle cruelty. Her voice was filled with a fierce, protective indignation. He was mean. And you didn't even cry. No, I didn't, I said, a sense of calm settling over me. We stopped at a traffic light, and I turned to look at them properly. Sophie, Leo, listen to me. Never, ever let someone else's words define your worth. What Grandpa Arthur said, that's about him. It has nothing to do with you, and it has nothing to do with me. I know my truth. I've always done my best to take care of myself and both of you. Some people see that, and some people don't. But what matters most is that I never forget it. You are both the most amazing, wonderful people I know, exactly as you are. They both nodded quietly. Sophie reached over and gently took Leo's hand. As we merged onto the highway, leaving the suffocating propriety of Laurelhurst behind, the sky began to clear. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a watery, golden light over the hood of the car. We were heading home, to our house by the sea, a place built not on reputation, but on resilience. A place built on love. A month passed. The calendar turned, Christmas came and went in a gentle flurry of wrapping paper and sugar cookies, and the new year arrived with the quiet promise of a fresh start. The Thanksgiving incident had settled within me, not as a festering wound, but as a scar, a smooth, pale reminder of something that had healed. I had finally, truly let go. One afternoon, as I was sorting through emails, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at the screen and my breath caught. It was from my mother. Her first contact since that day. I opened it with a sense of weary curiosity. The message was surprisingly long. Claire, we've lost the house. Your father's investments, he was leveraged too heavily. None of it worked out. It's being foreclosed. Please, I just want to talk. I furrowed my brow. A strange, bitter taste filled my mouth. Why no? A few days later, a message came from Beatrice, the same sister who had looked at me with such disdain. Her social media profile picture had been changed to one of her looking somber. I know it's terribly late, but I'm so sorry, Claire. For everything. A hollow feeling bloomed in my chest. And then I understood. It turned out my father, facing financial ruin, had started desperately calling old contacts, looking for a loan, an investment, a lifeline. One of them, a commercial broker he hadn't spoken to in years, mentioned a rising star in the Portland real estate scene who was making waves with her company, Cedar Peak Properties. A brilliant young woman, he'd said, a single mother who had built an empire from scratch. Her name, he'd mentioned, was Claire Wallace. The pieces must have clicked into place for my father with the force of a tectonic shift. He must have looked me up. I never lived in hiding, but I had built a fortress of privacy around my life, not out of shame, but because there was simply no reason to share my world with people who had so decisively ejected me from theirs. Finally, a message came from Arthur himself. I have misjudged you all this time. I am sorry. I will be honest. We are in serious trouble. If there is any way you could help. I stared at my phone, the screen glowing in the dim light of my living room. I didn't move for a long time. I never replied. Not to my mother, not to my sister, and not to my father. Some might call it cold, heartless. But I didn't care. The truth was, I no longer felt the burning rage or the deep, aching sadness. I didn't even feel a flicker of hope. All that remained was one quiet, unshakable truth. I had come too far to go back now. The peace I had fought so hard to build for myself and my children was not for sale. It was not a bargaining chip to be used to bail out the very people who had tried to sink me. The calls and messages continued for days, a desperate, digital barrage. I let them all go to voicemail, let them all remain unread. There was nothing left to return to. Everything I needed to protect was already here, within the warm, cedar-paneled walls of my home. And that was more than enough. The doorbell rang on a Tuesday afternoon. The kids were in their rooms, quietly occupied with books and Legos. I had just finished washing lunch dishes, my hands still damp. I walked to the front door, glancing at the security monitor on the wall, and I froze. Standing on my doorstep was my father. A soft gasp escaped my lips. He looked smaller. The towering, formidable presence that had dominated my childhood was gone. His shoulders sagged, his back was hunched. The sharp, tailored suits were replaced by a faded polo shirt and worn trousers. His hair, now almost completely white, was unkempt. His face was etched with lines of exhaustion and desperation I had never seen before. He looked like a man hollowed out from the inside. I stared at the screen, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. A part of me wanted to leave him standing there, to let him feel a fraction of the rejection he had so freely dispensed. But another, softer part saw only a broken old man on my porch. Taking a steadying breath, I quietly opened the door. "Claire," he said, his voice raspy. It had been years since he'd used my name without a tone of condescension. I just want to talk. For a moment. What could a man who believes his daughter and grandchildren are an embarrassment possibly have to say to me? The words were out before I could stop them, colder than I intended. He flinched but didn't answer. Instead, he held out a crumpled paper bag. "For Sophie and Leo. From that bakery they like downtown." I remembered. I didn't take it. I just stared at the bag, a pathetic, greasy symbol of too little, too late. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said at last, his gaze falling to the weathered wood of my porch. "I was wrong. About everything. I never once tried to see what you were doing, what you were building. I was blind." I knew somehow that he meant it. For the first time, there was no performance, no manipulation. Just the raw, clumsy truth. And yet, feeling that truth only made a faint crack appear in the dam I'd built around my heart. "Even so," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I have no intention of helping you." I quietly closed the door. That night, after the kids were asleep, I stood in the kitchen, sipping cold chamomile tea. My phone buzzed again. A message from my mother. "Please, Claire." Even a little support. We need your help. Before I could close the screen, another message popped up. It was from my father. I'm sorry for showing up like that, but you know the situation. Please, can you help us financially? For the family's sake? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then, without hesitation, I typed a short reply. What family are you referring to? I hit send. Then I opened my contacts and, one by one, I blocked their numbers. As I placed the phone face down on the counter, I exhaled, a long, slow breath I felt I'd been holding for a decade. That was the moment. The final, clean cut. I did not believe that true strength meant unconditionally accepting overtures that only came after the sky had already fallen. Maybe I needed to be pushed out that day on their doorstep. Maybe that rejection was the cruel, necessary catalyst that made me strong enough to build this life, to protect my children's joy. And now I understood with perfect clarity, the door to my life was mine to open, and mine to close. Winter break ended, and the comforting rhythm of our daily lives returned. That spring, my work was featured in a prominent business magazine. The headline read, "A Mother's Resilience: How Claire Wallace Built a $40 million Real Estate Empire from the Ground Up." The journalist had called me a model of modern success, a testament to the power of grit. The article caused a ripple effect I hadn't anticipated. The story of a single mother, cast out by her family, who had built a legacy of her own, resonated with people. My inbox was flooded with messages from women who said my story had given them courage. A local television station even reached out about filming a short documentary. But the most surprising reaction came from my family. A few days after the article went live, I was scrolling through a social media feed when I saw it. Beatrice had shared the article. I had blocked their numbers, but not their public profiles. Above the link to the story, she had written a single, glowing sentence, "So incredibly proud of my amazing sister, Claire." I stared at the screen, a hollow laugh catching in my throat. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a profound sense of detachment. They were proud of me now, when it was convenient, when my success could be co-opted and reflected back on them. No matter how they tried to rewrite the narrative, the words spoken on that Thanksgiving Day were etched in stone. I quietly closed the app. A few days after that, a letter arrived. The envelope was addressed in my mother's familiar, looping script, but the return address was a small apartment in a suburb I barely recognized. My hands trembled slightly as I debated opening it. Finally, I slid my finger under the seal. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, covered in my father's shaky, unfamiliar handwriting. The ink was faded, the words stilted, but the regret was palpable. I read the article. I admit it, Claire. You have far surpassed anything I ever could have imagined. I spent my whole life believing a family, a life, was supposed to look a certain way. Because of that, I saw nothing. I was blind to your strength, your courage. I was a fool. For your children's sake, could we meet? I want to apologize to them. To their faces. I will never speak ill of you or them again. I promise. I folded the letter slowly and placed it on the kitchen counter. I thought of Sophie's fierce defense, of Leo's innocent confusion. I thought of the years of silence and the sudden, desperate pleas. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about them. It was about me. It was about letting go of the poison of resentment so that I could be truly free. Later that day, I wrote a short reply. I forgive you. For my own sake, I am letting the anger go. But forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. You will not have access to our lives. Sophie, Leo, and I have built something real and whole, entirely apart from you. We are living fully. I wish you peace. After I dropped the letter in the mailbox, a profound sense of lightness settled over me. No anger remained, no sadness. Only clarity. I no longer lived for anyone's approval. They could call me an embarrassment, ignore me, cast me out, and still, I had risen. I would keep rising, my eyes fixed forward, walking the path I had chosen, side by side with the only two people whose opinions had ever truly mattered. That evening, Sophie and Leo curled up beside me on the couch. Sophie leaned her head against my shoulder. Mom? My teacher saw you in that magazine. She said you're really cool. Yeah, Leo added, beaming. Everyone says you're amazing. I laughed and pulled them into a tight hug, burying my face in their hair. Thank you, my loves. But you know what? You two are what I am most proud of in the entire world. On the television, a local news segment was replaying a clip from the magazine feature. The three of us sat together, watching it with quiet smiles. The warmth, the softness, the easy laughter, this was the family I had always dreamed of. And I had built it myself. The spring air blowing off the Pacific was still crisp, but it carried the undeniable scent of change, of things beginning to thaw. I sat on my deck, steam curling from my coffee mug, my laptop open. My inbox was a familiar torrent of investment inquiries, media requests, and invitations to speak. I was reviewing them with my usual calm objectivity when a name in the sender field stopped me. My mother. The subject line read simply, "I just want to talk." This time, it wasn't a plea for help. With some hesitation, I opened it. The words inside were quiet, direct, and startlingly self-aware. Claire, I have read your letter over and over again these past few months. I forgive you, but you will not have access to our lives. I've thought deeply about what that means. For so long, I let your father's anger and pride make my choices for me. I was a coward. I gave up thinking for myself. After seeing your strength and after the life we knew fell apart, I have started to want to change. Slowly, but truly. I want to apologize to Sophie and Leo. I did nothing for them. I stood by and let them be hurt. I am not asking for anything. I just want to talk to you. And to them, if you would allow it. Nothing more. Even if it's just for a moment in a small corner of your life, I would be grateful. I stared at the screen, unsure of what to feel, let alone what to type in return. The anger was gone. The wall of rejection had crumbled away, leaving behind only the faint echo of a distant sorrow. A week later, I took Sophie and Leo to a park overlooking the Willamette River. I had arranged to meet my mother there. She said my father wouldn't be coming. That decision, she had explained, was hers to enforce. The afternoon sunlight was gentle, filtering through the new leaves of the cherry trees. As we approached the designated bench, I saw her. She stood when she saw us, her hands twisting in her lap. Her face was lined with an anxiety that seemed genuine. I held my children's hands tightly, guiding them along the path. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice thin and unsteady. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat and gave a quiet nod. Sophie and Leo looked at her with wide, uncertain eyes. My mother knelt, bringing herself to their level. "A long time ago," she began, her voice cracking slightly, "I was not a very good grandmother. I let your grandfather say terrible things, and I didn't stop him. I have regretted that every single day. I wanted to see you both to tell you that you are wonderful children. I see now how hard your mom has worked, and how much she loves you. And I am so sorry." Leo stared at her for a long moment before asking softly, "Are you not mad at our mom anymore?" "No, sweetie. I'm not." "I was wrong," she whispered. "I'm just sorry." Sophie looked at me, her eyes searching my face for a cue. I gave her the smallest of nods. She reached out a tentative hand and gently touched our mother's arm. A small, simple gesture that felt monumental. We stayed for about an hour. She told me, without drama or self-pity, about their new life. They were in a small rental in Beaverton. My father had found a job at a hardware store. Beatrice was juggling 2 part-time retail jobs. My mother cleaned offices in the evenings. They were struggling. There were no savings, no retirement plan. "Every month is a balancing act," she said with a tired smile. She also told me that the 3 of them had started family therapy. "At first, my father had resisted," she said, "but now he filled out the cognitive behavioral worksheets diligently." Beatrice had started journaling. Each of them, in their own broken way, was trying to learn a new language, one without blame and emotional avoidance. "It will take a long time," my mother said quietly, clutching a paper cup of coffee. "But I really do want to change." I didn't say much. I just listened. But as the soft spring light fell across her face, I saw a woman who was finally looking forward instead of back. And for now, that was enough. On the drive home, Sophie whispered from the back seat, Grandma Helen's voice sounded soft today. Yeah, it did, I replied. Can we get ice cream? Leo chimed in, and just like that, the car filled with the easy, uncomplicated joy of the present. At a red light, I glanced in the rearview mirror at their happy, sticky faces. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's not a magic eraser for the past. Maybe it's just the quiet, deliberate act of unfastening the chains that tie you to old wounds, so you can walk forward unburdened. We would never be the family from the picture-perfect house. We would never erase the years of pain. But perhaps, sometimes, reconciliation can look like this: a quiet conversation in a park, a space left open for a future letter, a carefully guarded door that is no longer bolted, but simply closed. My life was finally, irrevocably, in my own hands. I was no longer just Arthur's daughter. I was Sophie and Leo's mother. I was Claire. And I would continue to walk forward with my head held high into the life I had built.